So now we're going to take a look at using the new Content Aware Move tool in Photoshop CS6. And again, it uses Content Aware technology where Photoshop is analyzing the pixels outside of the selection you make and determining the best way to copy them to the inside of the selection where everything looks real. So here we have what appears to be looks like Team Captain America winning soapbox here. But if you look at my layers panel, you'll see I've got another layer called Move over here. If I turn off that layer, hide its visibility temporarily, you can see the original shot. All right, so these soapboxes are dead even, all right? But we can use the Content Aware Move tool to scoot that soapbox a little bit ahead of the other one. Now, you'll notice that I didn't move it very much. There's a reason, and this is also fun. Once you've done that, I highly recommend sitting here and just toggling the visibility off and on. It is a lot of fun. It's all about entertainment. I couldn't move that soapbox much further than I moved it. Okay, so this is not a tool to use to move something from the far left of your image to the far right. Don't try it because it's not going to work. You can scoot things around in your object or in your photo a very small distance, and it will work if you have a good chunk of free background space around that item. And we do indeed have that here in this shot. So let's take a look at how it works. It's very similar, nearly identical to the patch tool in that you can create the move on a different layer, just like I did here. I could have also duplicated that layer and then moved the item, but to be more efficient, I did it on an empty layer, so I have fewer pixels, smaller file size. You can use the Content Aware Move tool to draw a rough selection around the item you want to move, but you don't have to. Just like with the patch tool, you can use the selection tool of your choice, get it all set up, create your empty layer, and then switch to the Content Aware Move tool to do the actual moving magic. So let's take a look at how to do that. Go ahead and create a new layer onto which we're going to do our moving. And now we're going to come over and let's just go ahead and use the Content Aware Move tool first, then we'll do it again and use a different selection tool. So the Content Aware Move tool lives in the same tool set as the healing tools and the patch tool that we just used, and it looks like two intertwining arrows. So go ahead and click to activate that. Now we're going to trot up to the options bar, okay, and just like the patch tool, there's a mode pop-up menu, okay, for this tool. Content Aware Move can be used in two different ways. You can use it to move an object in your photo. You can also use it to extend an object. That's what the other mode is, called extend, and we're going to look at that too. Extend is handy when you need to make a building a teeny bit taller, a teeny bit wider, that kind of thing. So you can extend, elongate items when you put the tool in that mode. The next menu we have is that adaptation menu again. This controls how strict Photoshop adheres to copying the pixels that are just outside of your selection, inside your selection. You've got the same choices here as you do with the patch tool set to Content Aware. And again, we've got the all-powerful sample all layers checkbox, which allows us to do our moving on a whole nother layer, which means we're not messing up our original photo. So here we go. We've already got the tool activated. We've got our options bar all set. So let's go ahead and draw a rough selection around our soapbox guy. And for this particular one, I'm gonna go outside of the wheel just a little bit, and then when I come down to the front of the soapbox, instead of just staying close to the soapbox, I want to catch that shadow that's being cast by the front of it. So that's going to help it make the retouch look real. Come around here and close up our selection. And as soon as you release your mouse button, you get marching ants. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll down in my document just a little bit. At this point, it's exactly the same as the patch tool. You simply click inside the selection, hold down your mouse button, and drag the object to where you want it to end up. When you release your mouse button, here again we've got a handy rich cursor that lets you know how far away from the original position you're moving the object. As soon as you release your mouse button, Photoshop is going to do all kinds of blurring. And now we have a winning soapbox. Okay, pretty amazing stuff. Now we do have an area right here and an area right here next to those two wheels on the driver's side that we need to clean up a little bit. That's easily done with either the clone stamp tool or the spot healing brush even. All right, so let's do a little bit of cleanup real quick. I'm gonna make another empty layer, and I'm gonna call it Cleanup on Wheels. Just again, letting myself, my future self know what the heck I did on this layer. So now let's come over here and let's have a go using the spot healing brush to see if we can clean up that area and make it look a little bit more real. Spot healing brush lives within the same tool set, the very top of that tool set. Go ahead and give it a click to activate it. And we're gonna put the patch, or the spot healing brush rather, in content aware mode. Okay, so that was new in CS5, I believe. So go ahead and turn on content aware, turn on sample all layers, again, because we're gonna do this fix on an empty layer, and we need to tell Photoshop to look through that layer to what lies below. I'm gonna go down in brush size a little bit by pressing the left bracket key, and let's just see if painting over that area just a bit can clean it up. This tool did an okay job down here on the front wheel, but back here, I'm still not getting the realistic look that I want. So what I could do, let me zoom back out, is I could switch to, say, the clone stamp tool, or maybe the regular healing brush. You know, it's all about finding, knowing the tools that will do the job and running through all of them until you get the effect that you want. So let's go grab the clone stamp tool. Clone stamp tool looks, its icon looks just like a stamp, all right? So let's activate that, and then we can come over here, trot up to the options bar, make sure everything is set the way you want it. With this particular tool, we have a sample menu. Instead of merely a sample all layers checkbox, we have a sample menu which lets you determine how many layers underneath this layer, currently active layer, that are going to be looked at. Okay, so I'm going to say all layers. Oops. And zoom back out, zoom back in. So now what you want to do with the clone stamp tool, I can go in a little bit further, is you need to tell Photoshop which part of the image you want to copy over. All right, so I want to grab a little bit more of that shadow, okay, and have it around that wheel. So I'm going to do this with a modifier key. Press and hold Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC, and click in the area that you want to copy. Release the modifier key, mouse over to the area that you're gonna fix, and you'll notice, if I zoom in, see how my cursor is filled with my sample point that I just set? As you move that cursor, see, it's letting you know, giving you a preview of what that copy or clone is gonna look like should you choose to go forth with it. So, as I paint, Photoshop is copying over that area. And now if I zoom back out and use my space bar to move around within the image, then in just a couple of minutes, we can create a nice looking shadow that looks a bit more real. And of course, if you were doing this at home on a real client's image, you would take a lot longer than I just did to clean up that area, and you would absolutely be charging by the hour for that. This is new technology. I think, you know, at least $175 an hour for this kind of thing on the low end. So let's do that one again, shall we? Let me go ahead and turn off the layers that I created for you. So we're back on our original image layer. This time, let's have a go using a different selection tool, okay? So I'll move up in my image just a little bit. I'll create my new layer first, and we're gonna call this one Quick Select, and then we'll compare the two and we'll see which one did a better job. Okay, so now I need to click back on the layer that has the pixels, grab my quick selection tool, and again, I'm using quick selection because there is high contrast between the item I want to select and the background. And now I can click and drag to paint and create a selection. Those of you in the studio audience can see me. I'm not sure if the great internet can see me, but when I'm using the quick select tool and I'm not using my tablet at home, I keep 2 fingers on those bracket keys for my brush size keyboard shortcuts, which allows me to quickly decrease brush size when I get down here to an area like these wheels that I don't want Photoshop to grab a whole big swath like that. And now I'll hold down the Option key or Alt key to put that tool in subtract mode. And so keeping 2 fingers on the bracket keys lets me be a little bit faster with the quick selection tool. So now we've got a decent selection going on here. I need to get a little bit more of his helmet. And now let's pop the selection out a little bit so that we don't leave any weird outlines around where he used to be. So we'll use the select menu again, choose modify, expand. We'll try 5 pixels. This is a fairly low resolution image, so that should do the trick. And it did. So now we're ready to activate our new empty layer that we've already made. So we'll click that in the layers panel. And then we can switch to Content Aware Move tool. Again, it lives in the healing brush set. So choose Content Aware Move, take a peek at the options bar, make sure everything is set to your liking. This time, why don't we change the adaptation to strict and see if that does a little bit better job at around those wheels. So now we're ready to click inside the selection and move it down a little bit. Again, you just don't want to move the object very far. And that, to me, looks like it did a little bit of a better job. I'll go ahead and get rid of our marching ant so that we can analyze the photo a little bit easier. Press Command D or Control D on a PC to deselect. And we've got a little bit of an area around that back wheel that we need to clean up, but the front wheel looks a whole lot better. So again, your success with this tool is going to be dependent upon the contrast in your image and how much free background space you've got for Photoshop to work with around the object that you're trying to move. Okay, you'll notice that we didn't have any problems over in this area. It was only in the area that's closer to the other soapbox racer that we had a little bit of a cleanup to do with. So let's take a look at this on another image. All right, so let us say that you would really love to frame this picture. You would really, really, really love to frame this picture. But you need these girls to be closer together, okay? We can use Content Aware Move to scoot this little superhero over to the right a little bit. Okay, so let's give that a shot. Again, let's create a new layer onto which we're going to do our scooting. And since we got better results using the Quick Select tool to create our selection first before moving to the Content Aware Move tool on the soapbox racers, let's start with that method. So I'll click back on the image layer, grab the Quick Select tool or any other selection tool of your choice, or even the pen tool if you want to use it to make a path and then load a selection from the path. So we can select our girl fairly quickly. Again, I'm keeping 2 fingers on those bracket keys so that I can be more efficient. I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. So that I'm a little bit more efficient with what I'm selecting and changing my brush size. All right, now I got a bigger area in here selected than I wanted, so I'm going to increase brush size just a touch. Hold down Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC to remove that area from the selection. Get rid of that area too. And now what I need to do is expand that selection just a touch. So we're going to go to the Select menu, Modify, Expand. Again, this number that you enter here is completely resolution dependent. I'm going to try 8 pixels. And that's pretty good. I've got a little area over here included in my selection that I didn't mean to. So what can we do to quickly get rid of it? Pop into quick mask mode, grab your brush tool, and just paint over that area with black. So that's another way, like we were looking at earlier, that you can fine tune your selections. Now I'm all good to go. Zoom out a little bit. I'm going to click to activate the empty layer onto which we're going to do our move. Go grab the Content Aware Move tool, peek at the options bar, make sure I've got everything set the way I want it. And we're going to click and drag within the selected area, and we're going to move her over here. Okay, release your mouse button. Photoshop does its magic. Hold your breath if you would like to. Cross your fingers. And it did a pretty good job. Okay, we've got a couple of areas that need to be cleaned up, but nothing that's not, you know, too tough to fix using either spot healing brush, or the clone stamp tool. Okay, so let's look at that one more time. I'll go ahead and delete that layer. So we'll create our new empty layer. This time, let's just use the regular old Content Aware Move to make our selection. We might change the adaptation to medium, make it not quite as strict. And draw your selection around the offending object. This kind of thing would definitely be easier to do with a graphics tablet, because you could use your pen, the stylus rather, and the drawing is a lot easier than with a mouse. All right, let's call this good. With this method, I don't really need to pop my selection out because I drew it larger. Okay, so you can skip that step. So once everything is set in the options bar, let's go ahead and click and drag to scoot our superhero girl over a little bit, and release your mouse button, and Photoshop does all the blending that it needs to do, and that time it did a much better job. So let me get rid of the selection so you can see it by pressing Command or Control D. I've got just one little area up here that I need to fix. And since I did that move on an empty layer, all I have to do is grab the eraser tool and just delete that little bit right there. So I can press E to grab the eraser tool and come over here and just erase that. And that doesn't work at all, so never mind. So that's Content Aware Move. Exciting? Useful? Maybe? Yeah? The other portion of that tool is to use it to extend things like building. All right, so if you look at my layers panel here of this photo of Manhattan, the Empire State Building is tall, but it ain't that tall. So what I've done here is I've extended it just a little bit by using Content Aware Move. So let's take a look at how to do that. Works the same way. We're going to create a new layer onto which we're going to do our extending, because we don't want to mess up our original photo at all. We don't want to have to start over. We don't want to have to close the document and reopen it and all that kind of good stuff just to get back to our starting point if we happen to mess up. We don't want to take a chance on saving over the original image. So here again, you can either use the Content Aware Move tool to create your selection, or you can use the selection tool of your choice. All right, I'll go ahead and use that tool. And this time, I'm going to click and drag to draw a straight line across that segment of the Empire State Building. Go around the antenna, come back down here. Now I'm ready to extend it. The Content Aware Move tool is active. In the options bar, you want to change the mode to extend. Adaptation menu works the same way. You'll have to experiment with that because it will vary on an image basis. Make sure the Sample All Layers checkbox is turned on, and then when you're ready to do the extending, you simply click and drag in the direction that you want the extension to happen. And when you release your mouse button, Photoshop does the blending that it needs to do to make it look real. So here's our before, and here's our after. Now, because I've got sky behind here, you know, and not a whole bunch of other buildings. It's not duplicating anything weird, so it did a really good job. Also because I wasn't moving it or I wasn't extending it very far. So let's take a look at that again with another selection tool. So I'll just grab, we can have a go at it with the quick select tool. Zoom in a little bit. Keep my hands on the bracket keys so that I can create a good selection. And now I want to pop that selection out just a little bit to give Photoshop a little bit more room to work. And I'm actually going to go into quick mask mode and get rid of just that part of the selection. So switch to the brush tool, painting with black, and I can get rid of that part of the selection. There we go. Press Q again to get back out of quick mask mode, pop out your selection to help Photoshop. Select, modify, expand. I'm going to try maybe 4 pixels on this one. That ought to do it. And then switch to the Content Aware Move tool. Make sure that it's in extend mode. Experiment with adaptation if you want, and click and drag to move the building up. Now, if I keep moving it up, let's just see what happens. Okay, now I've gone beyond where the original building was, and you can see it didn't fill in all that area. I would have had to select a larger portion or a taller portion of the building in order to extend it further. Okay. So if I go back to where I was a moment ago by pressing Command or Control Z to undo, and now I can click and drag upward, and you can hold down the Shift key to keep you from moving left and right if you only want to drag in one direction. And I'm just going to make sure that I don't extend it beyond the size of the piece that's in my selection. Press Command or Control D to deselect to get rid of that, and here's our before and here's our after. So once again, using it in very small doses. And if you've got a good swath of background around the item that you're messing with, it'll do an amazing job. And these kind of tools are going to keep getting better with each version of the program. All right, so here's another example of the exact same thing. Here's our original, and I increased the skyline. And then I came back in with the healing brush to fix the hard line that I got. So let's take a look at that. Exact same maneuver. Create a new layer onto which you're going to do your extending. And this time I'm going to use the quick selection tool to grab the buildings down here. Again, keeping my fingers on the bracket keys. And we've got a decent selection of our buildings here. So now let's pop that selection out just a little bit. Select menu, modify, expand. Let's try 5 pixels and see if that does the trick. Looks like I need a little more. So go back to the select menu, modify, expand. We'll do 5 more. That looks pretty good. We'll give it a shot anyway. Now click to activate the layer onto which you're going to do your extending. Switch back to the Content Aware Move tool. Make sure the options bar is all set. We're going to try this one set to strict and see what happens. And then just click and drag a little ways. And let's see if we can't increase the height of those buildings. Press Command or Control D to deselect. And you can see that that time I didn't even need to come back in with the healing brush and fix the area above the buildings. The reason I had to do that was because I cheated and I just used the rectangular marquee just to draw a very fast selection. And because my selection didn't follow the contours of the buildings, then I ended up with a weird line up there. So that's why I had to get rid of it with the healing brush. So it's a good thing to have if you purchase the course and you get the exercise files. It's a good thing to have these other layers in there, even if you don't necessarily have to use them, because it gives you more ideas of how to fix retouches like this if they don't go as perfectly as they happen to do right here. So here's our before and after. So again, you just don't want to extend very far, you just don't want to move very far, and it's going to work better on images that have a good little chunk of what I call free background space around that area, so Photoshop has more pixels to copy from.